Hey, we're back with part 3 of the 3D printer build. Welcome to Hack a Week. So last time we left off with, let's see, X-axis and some of the Z-axis frame. Today what we're going to do is put the belt onto the X-axis frame that had the stepper motor on it, so we can drive that back and forth on the X-axis. And then on the Z-axis we're going to install the lead screws and put that in place, and then we'll get the hotbed put on. Let's have at it. First up, we've got some plastic bits. These pieces need to go up on the top here. They're going to be a support for this rod. That's the rod everything is just going to ride up and down on, and the lead screw that will mount to the motor down here. So these two pieces will go up on the top rail. There's two holes staggered and they're offset a little bit. The one with the shorter dimension and the extra hole, that's going to go toward the outside. I'm going to put that on with a it's a 5 by 12 millimeter hex nut. Got the two bolts through here, two nuts on the other side. We'll drop it into this rail right here. We're going to just screw that down lightly for now. We're probably going to move that a little bit later because we need to get this rod all nice and parallel. Do the same thing over on the other side. Okay, these are in place loosely now, and there's some 320 millimeter rods that run through here. They look to be about 8 millimeters in diameter. I've never really measured the diameter, but drop those two in. And they're going to run right down through these linear bearings built into this assembly. And you want to put it on here with the larger of the two that sticks out for a stepper motor over here on this side. You push those rods all the way down until, whoops, we knocked the bearing out of that. That's interesting. Wow, really? Okay. Let's hope that stays in there during the operation. It's a little odd, but whatever. Alright. These rods go all the way down to the bottom where they go into that sheet metal brace. You need to cap this rod so that it doesn't go anywhere, so we'll put a M3 by 20 millimeter bolt through there. Put a nut on the other side that fits that and tighten that down. Do the same thing to the other side. Now we can put the lead screws in through the hole in the top of this plastic piece into the nut. Turn it clockwise, it'll spin right in. We're going to put it down into that little coupler right there. Let's make sure that the Allen screws are backed out all the way. So it looks like you want to screw that in there about probably 8 millimeters, at least 10, so that you're down where this is going to bite on it okay. So an easy way to measure that is to first bottom out the screw right at the top of this. Then come back here and take a look right here at how much you have sticking out, and you can get an idea that, well, if I turn it about that far, okay, I'm down in there where I know I'm gonna be able to tighten it up. And so we tighten up the set screws on the coupler and repeat on the other side. So if I turn both of these counterclockwise, I bottom everything out, turn them simultaneously clockwise, and I'm raising the Z-axis that will carry the X-axis, and the Y is taken care of here. Now we can mount this gizmo. This has got the little teeth that hold the belt in place so that it can move back and forth this way on the X-axis, and it's going to mount to these linear bearings. There's a slot here. So I'm going to start by just dropping one in there. Line up these other ones up on the top, then you need to gather up 10 M4 by 8 millimeter screws. All 10 bolts tight. Slide it back and forth, feels pretty good. Now we can install the stepper motor for the X-axis drive. The electrical plug points downwards, and it's going to mount behind here with some M3 by, I believe they're 20s. Look at these tightened up now. This one you want to be careful because it can crack, and this is the second time putting this together. I actually already cracked it once right there. It's a little bit of a weak spot, but a little super glue on there, if you have some, will take care of that. Okay, first we need a drive pulley for the belt, so we'll put that on the motor and pull it back about maybe 3 or 4 millimeters away from the end and tighten it up. We'll probably move this a little more later when we adjust the belt, but for now just snug it up against the armature and we're good. Got a little discrepancy here. The first one I found in these instructions for the auto leveling, it was my understanding I bought the auto leveling bed. This could have been something they did away with, but right here it shows bed auto leveling 1, this plastic piece that goes on that bottom linear bearing. I don't have that anywhere in my parts. Then it goes on to another version of it, whole different thing with 2 more pieces that go on there. I don't have any of that either, so I'm going to blow past that and put the belt on now. Very similar to the other belt we did. So the belt on the X-axis, it's a lot like the one we did down there for the Y. It clamps in right here behind the linear bearings in those teeth, and we do a wire tie at each end on this one, a little bit different than the other one. So I'm going to feed the belt in just below the motor over on the other side here where you can't see off camera. I'm going to give myself about that much belt and stick it into the slot here. Make sure you get all the teeth lined up and engaged and push it in there. Make sure it's pushed in all the way. Just use the edge of something. It'll reach in there and bottom out. Take the leftover, bring it back like that. Back over here on the motor side, I'm going to take the belt, keep the toothed side towards the motor, put it back in above the pulley, slide it on through, and carry it across. And over on this side, it's going to go through a bearing housing right here. There's a bearing it's going to ride on. So take all the slack out of it. Now it's coming in over the top of the bearing, so we're going to go back in underneath the bearing and poke it out this side right here and take up the slack. Back over here to the anchor point. We're going to slide this back and forth a few times, make sure everything's good, and pull it taut. It's a pretty good tug to get a tooth in. Take it to the first easy tooth, and I'm going to go 1 tooth more, just to get a tiny bit of pre-stretch in there. The tricky part is getting them started and in the slot when they're under tension. Okay, I'll just fold that back and leave that extra for now. Okay, I've got the camera carefully set up where you can see that end pulley. What I'm going to do is loosen up the set screws on that. Get both of them loose, and I'm just going to let that pulley decide on its own where it wants to sit. You see how it's got nice even space now? It tends to ride the crest in the middle. So right there is good. I'll tighten that up. Nice and smooth. I've got this little leftover piece of plastic that's one of the cutouts from some of the laser cut acrylic parts. Just so happens to be the exact same width as the notch
that's left over in the end of this. So I think I will put a dab of super glue here. That notch doesn't need to be there. The pulley doesn't run through there. The belt doesn't run through there. It may have on another printer. Maybe this part was kind of lifted from another. I don't know. I don't know what the story is with that. But I can just barely wedge in there that little piece. And I can still get the screw in. And now I can tighten it up properly. Now it's as tight as the rest and it won't crack. There's a little closer look of what I just did. That little part right there is the part that I glued in, so it lets you just squish that down a little better. Hotbed frame. We're going to mount this up here onto the platter, and it's going to go like this with the wire plug pointing out the back. This is going to be held on with some 25mm long 3mm screws. There's 4 of them. My instructions give some strange information about threading these into an acrylic piece underneath that bed right there. Well, that's not the case with my printer. We've got springs that will go on. Insert the screws through the hotbed, put the spring on, and then it's going to go into that hole, and there's a wing nut that's going to go on the other side. And this is just a Phillips screw head. For now, I'm just going to get the wing nut on and started. And I'll go back and put a spring and a wing nut on all 4 corners. Screw those through the hole down here. And we'll put a wing nut on it. And get the 2 more at the back. Okay, wing nuts on the last one. And I think what I'll do right now is just I think I'll take a Phillips screwdriver and just give all these a bit of a tighten up. Let's just go like 1, 2, 3, 4. Good enough. Take it to where it's just hitting and go 1, 2, 3, 4. We can get finesse with this later. For now, roughly the same tension. Now we can move on to the extruder assembly right here. First thing we're going to do is put this billet piece of aluminum. It's got a set screw right here on the outside and a couple of holes. There's a threaded hole and a blank hole. Put the threaded hole towards yourself. Then we've got a M6 by 8mm Allen head bolt. Put that in there. And we will just leave that a little bit snug for now. We're going to tighten it up the rest of the way later. Okay, I'm going to grab the last 40mm motor assembly. Make sure that the electrical terminal is pointing up. And I'm going to mount this assembly, this plastic piece. This is what's going to go on next, right here. I'll put a single M3 by 5mm bolt right there. So make sure that this all stays lined up, the hole over here where there's a screw hole. Keep that plastic bit lined up nice and flush with the top, and we'll tighten this up. Good enough. Now we'll put the gear on that is the extruder gear. This is the one that's going to drive the filament through the extruder. We'll put this on. There's 2 set screws. Slide it onto the shaft. Make sure one of the set screws lines up with the flat side of the shaft. And the extruder hole is right there where I'm poking that Allen wrench up through. You want the gear to be lined up about like it is now, in the middle, so that the whole gear is roughly in the middle of that hole. I've got it pushed in as far as it'll go right now, and that's pretty close. But I could just flip it around and probably get a better fix on it that way. That's actually a better alignment. It's right in the middle, so I'm going to go with that. Now the filament idler roller goes on there. That pushes up against the gear and helps feed the filament through. There's a M3 by 16 screw that holds it in right here, but it needs to pivot, and there's really no provision there to lock that nut into place or that bolt in place. So this is a good spot for a little bit of Loctite. So I'm going to put a little on there and drop the bolt into that hole. Let's get it started into the motor. And the reason the Loctite's there is it's going to be able to keep that in a little bit better than just taking it into a certain torque, whatever. And, you know, it has to be loose, so it can't be tight against that. And if it is tight against that, well, you're assured it's going to stay in, but it's got to be able to pivot a little, which it can do now. So I'm going to put maybe a little more tension. Just good enough. Now the Loctite will help keep that from backing out. Now there's a spring that goes in that space right there, that little bitty space that's available. This whole spring has to squish into. I gotta get this down on the bench. So let's see, let's get the end that's in the white part started. Get back! Landed right side up. Shove it on there and get a screwdriver on this end. Like so. There we go. There's the feed mechanism. Looks a little wimpy, but we'll see how it works out. Definitely room for improvement there with some aluminum parts that don't flex. Now we can put the extruder in. Let's point the wires toward the back of the machine. We're going to put that in the blank hole here on this billet of aluminum. And since the motor is going to mount on that piece of aluminum as well, you can see right here, this is where the extruder is going to receive the piece of plastic. It's right at the base of that. So what we want to do is just bring that up flush with the base. You can just lay something like an Allen wrench across there and push up until you feel that. And then on the side is a set screw. And we'll give that a preliminary lockdown, make sure we've got everything straight, and then give it a final tighten up. Not much, just a little bit. Then we can get the motor on there. That will drop on there like so. And next up will be the fan, but for right now we'll hold this straight with the edge. Keep that billet of aluminum nice and parallel with the edge of this frame, and we'll give that a final tighten on that 3mm bolt underneath. Okay. Now we have the fan assemblies. So let's see, we need a heat sink, a fan. Got that right here. Let's see, the little guard for the fan right there. Two installation pillars, these little nylon standoffs, a couple of those. Two M3 by 45 screws. And let's see, M3 filler pieces, two of those. M3 washers, we need two of those. We'll just drop those right onto the M3s right now. In the instructions, they call those filler pieces. Isn't that interesting? We've got our little cooling fan to mount up here onto the heat sink on the motor, and it needs to go with the label side pointing in towards the heat sink. So what we'll do is put these two little white spacers into the heat sink first, and then we'll put the fan on top of the heat sink, label side in, and then we're going to put the cage in place, and then the M3 by 45mm bolt. And I already test fit this once, but I want to show you something. The bolts don't appear to be short enough. They're a little too long, in other words. They poke into the motor. It's a little tricky getting those to line up. So if I tighten that down as far as it goes, there's still some slop going on in the motor. So what I need to do is add another washer. I've got 6 of those washers total. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 2 more on. I'm going to put 3 of these washers. 3 washers on each one of these M3 by 45 screws. And we'll push this down, make sure it's bottomed out. Give this a final squish. Should be tight enough so that the motor doesn't move around on the mount. And we got it. Now we have the other fan to put on, and it has the duct work on it that blows down on the extruder. And so that's the way that's gonna go. I got the other fan hanging out here. The blower for that fan points down and into the ductwork. The whole works goes on like this. And then a M3 by 20 screw goes in there. And it's a self-tapping setup. There's just a hole drilled in the aluminum. And I already ran these in once ahead of time and got them tapped with just the screw that I'm using. If you do that ahead of time, it makes it a little easier when it comes time to do this part and install it. That takes care of the fans. There we go. We've got X, Y, and Z movement, and we have a print head installed. We got the extruder installed and the fans, and the next thing up, according to the instructions, would be the control board assembly, but that's for the next video. Coming along nicely, making good progress here, and everything's going together pretty well. Couple little goofy things here and there, but you figure it out. That's all you got to do, is have your wits about you. The instructions are a little strange, but use common sense. You'll figure out what's going on. So this is good. We've got these axes working. Next time around, it's going to be the electronics, control board, power supply, get some wiring going, and we'll see how far we get in that video. In the meantime, thanks for watching this one and all the others. Thanks for sharing. And be sure to like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And until next time. Coming along nicely. Next time we'll get the controller board on and the rest of the electronics. The rest of them. That was kind of like a Fez moment there from that 70s show. This is my 3D printer. I built it myself from eBay. I guess that's all for now, so thanks a lot for watching and stuff.